There were reports today of 2 new deaths from COVID-19 in Princeton. This disease has affected so many of us in the community, and wanted to start tonight by just taking a moment of silence to pay our respects to those who've been really harmed by this horrible pandemic. Thank you. So the first item on our agenda tonight are approval of minutes. We have the minutes from April 6, 2020, the closed session and regular session. So the first, someone needs to go on mute. I think I'm hearing something in the background. And also the minutes from April 13th, 2020, closed session and open session. And is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Leticia Fraga moves to approve the minutes.
Eve Niedergang seconds.
All right, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, minutes pass unanimously. And next we come to announcements, and I will make the first announcement just so people know who are tuning in for the first time. If you have a comment that you would like to make, you should use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. If you are tuning in or listening in on this phone call, if you want to make a comment, then you should send an email to princetoncomments@gmail.com. That account is being monitored during this meeting, and if you submit something, it will be read into the record. Okay, so we'll start with Mr. Cohen. Do you have any announcements for this evening?
I do not have any announcements.
Okay, Ms. Fraga, any announcements?
I do. I have a few, but I'll make them quick, and in more detail, I will submit the report to the clerk. But the few announcements I have, the Coronavirus Emergency Relief Fund is going to start issuing a weekly newsletter. It is going to be available in the Princeton Children's Fund's website, and anyone interested in receiving them on a weekly basis, on a regular basis, can sign up through the website to receive. Also, on behalf of Human Services, they have created a task force with community partners that are food providers in order to best address food insecurity for our residents. And we have been meeting on a weekly basis. And something that I've noticed is that on a weekly basis, the numbers are increasing of individuals in our community who are in need of assistance, in need of, who are experiencing food insecurity in their home because of our current economic crisis. The Human Services is working with the Health Department and Sustainable Princeton to provide wraparound services for economically disadvantaged residents who need to be quarantined. And I expect perhaps our health officer will go into more detail on that, but I do know that we have families, including in our Witherspoon Jackson neighborhood, who are experiencing issues because of family members or household members who are have tested positive, and it's becoming an issue for the rest of the family to be able to quarantine when they live in close quarters. But Human Services, and I really want to commend our health officer, who over the weekend we had some an emergency situation, and he was able to work on getting the family the assistance that they needed. Also, let's see. Oh, the other one is the Youth Advisory Committee is now recruiting. We're recruiting rising sophomores for the 2020-21 academic year. and we're accepting applications online until May 11th. So I encourage parents, if you have now freshmen who will be sophomores next year, take a look at the website on the municipal, the Youth Advisory Committee's webpage that describes the work of the committee, and then also encourage them to apply now. The only requirement is it's only for rising sophomores, must reside in Princeton, and includes our public schools and also our private schools that can apply, as long as they live in Princeton. And that's it for me.
Okay, great, thank you. Ms. Niedergang?
Thank you, Mayor. I just have one quick announcement that the Flood Mitigation Stormwater Committee will have its first virtual meeting this coming Friday at 10 a.m. There's a link on the municipal calendar. If you'd like to join us, we'd be excited to see you there. So that's it. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Mr. Williamson?
Thanks, Mayor. The Princeton Recreation Department has been working pretty hard on planning contingencies for the various different summer programs they host. So just to keep in tune with what's going to open and what changes are being made, you can just go to the municipal website to the link to Princeton Recreation, or just go directly to PrincetonRecreation.com. Princeton Recreation being one word.com. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Pearl-Lambros?
Yes, thank you. The business Zoom call that we do with the PMA, the Princeton Merchants Association, is going to take place again this week. We've been doing it weekly on April 30th at 10 o'clock. And we'll be discussing what reopening can look like. And we're going to try and have an open Q&A session. We're also going to be having our first Zoom Economic Development Committee meeting at 12 o'clock this coming Wednesday. And many businesses, I just want to say, many businesses are still working on getting their funds through the payroll protection plan and the emergency disaster relief loan program. And as we know from the news, the federal government has just added funds, a considerable amount. And this morning it has opened up where banks are now processing more loans. Hopefully that will be geared towards these small businesses in our community. And some consideration has been given to also funding the smaller community banks to help and try those, help those small businesses. I want to mention too that we launched today a survey and sent to a business community through the Princeton Merchants Association and also through our website to help us ascertain what the efficacy is of these programs. We want to know an opportunity to see what shortfalls may lie and what lies ahead for our business community. And we also want to get out to the business community that there are mentor programs like SCORE that can help you navigate through the complexities of the programs. There's a lot of grassroots efforts, and we're trying to get the word out about free consulting, free help with business digital presence, and online gift card payments, for example. So we'll be discussing these on the call on Thursday in the Economic Development Committee coming up on Wednesday. And if if you're a business and you have not been getting our emails, please go to our website and you can sign up or email me. Oh, thank you.
Great, thank you. And Ms. Sachs?
No announcements.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Cohen.
I'm sorry, I did remember one announcement that I wanted to make, which is that on May 7th, the planning board is going to be holding their first virtual hearing. So this is actually a little different. We've had one online meeting previously, but it was just for administrative matters. This is actually a hearing where we'll be taking public comment on the application. So it should be interesting. And again, I invite interested people to attend to see how the features work, because it's a similar system that will be used by the zoning board and by the Historic Preservation Commission once they restart having meetings with hearings as well.
Great, thank you. I had just a couple quick announcements. One is, I know we keep plugging the princetoncovid.org site at every meeting, but just wanted to put in another plug for that and recommend two particular sections on that site. So one is the What's Open tab, and there are a lot of local restaurants that are really trying to be creative and how they change what they do to adapt to our new circumstances. And, I think it's, we want to be spending our money and investing in the things that we care about. So I encourage everybody to check out that What's Open section, and it's probably the most pleasurable way to support some of the efforts going on in town. So check that out. There's also a virtual calendar on the site. There's always a lot going on in Princeton, and we're all trapped at home, so you might feel like there's nothing going on. But if you go to that calendar on the Princeton COVID site, you'll see that a lot of our institutions are still having events, but they're having them virtually, including the library. So it's a way to plug in and be connected with live events. So I encourage people to look at that too. And then finally, I just want to thank so many of the people who've really just have been going above and beyond during this crisis. A couple of them are on the Zoom call with us right now. Our health officer, Jeff Grosser, it's hard to imagine where we'd be without his leadership. George DiFernando, who's chair of the Board of Health, but really almost a honorary member of the staff because of the hours that he's putting in, which have been totally instrumental to helping us think through our strategy and our policy. So thank you to George. Thank you to our Chief of Police, Nick Sutter, our Administrator, Mark DeShield, departments like Recreation, which even though this doesn't really fall neatly within their purview, anytime anything's asked, they figure out a way to step up and help. And so many of our nonprofit institutions, it's like nobody wants to be in this situation. It's a horrible situation, but I think if I had to be anywhere right now, I'm just so thankful that I'm in a community like Princeton that is really rising to this challenge. So, and I want to thank all of my colleagues too. So just a big thank you from me to everybody. And are there any staff announcements?
No, Mayor.
Okay. Was that a yes or no?
No.
No, okay. All right, then we will, I did want to do a quick announcement, just if people haven't heard about the Alexander Bridge, now that nobody's really driving across it. That project is expected to be finished in mid-May. So hopefully, I know that Deanna Stockton's on the call. I don't know if we have a firm date yet, but we should have a firm date by our next meeting. Deanna, do you know, have they given you an exact date yet for the reopening?
Well, they've given me a schedule of work, and the latest work extends into the week of May 4th, but I don't know an actual date of completion and reopening within that week.
Okay, well, they might beat us before our next meeting, but we'll keep everybody updated on that. All right, and now we come to the main item on our agenda tonight, which is the 2020 municipal budget. We're going to be holding a public hearing on the amendment to the 2020 municipal budget, which was introduced at our last meeting. And then we also have 2162, which is the resolution adopting the 2020 municipal budget. And before we open the public hearing, I wanted to ask Mr. DeShield if, and we also have Sandy Webb, our CFO, on the call, if either of them wanted to make any comments.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a quick comment, and just wanted to bring back to Council's attention The amendments you have before you this evening are the results of the conversation direction given by council to bring the budget in without an increase for a 0% increase. What we did was take a look at the budget. We brought the budget down to a 0% increase. We also looked at some of our revenues going into, we understand that there will be a reduction in revenues. We made adjustments for those revenues also. So those are the reductions that you see here in these amendments that will give us a 0% increase for this year. We will have to continue to work and really keep an eye on next year as we go through this process. It's unprecedented, and really see and work towards next year's budget and also in this year's budget and keeping everything, our expenditures. One thing I will put in front of council, I think is important to note that as we move through this pandemic, we still have some unknowns. There is the possibility for additional budget implications, particularly from the health department as we move through this and go back to regular operations that will have to be supported by this budget. So I just want people to be aware, and as we get a better idea on the handle on what those dollars amount for, we'll be bringing them before council.
Right, thank you. And I would just add to that on the health department side that I think, I don't know how many people had a chance to watch or read about the governor's announcement earlier today about what that blueprint looks like for opening up. But there are some initial steps where those things have to be in place in order for the state to make a determination that it is safe for us to start returning back to normal. And one of those that is going to more likely than not heavily involve our local health department is the contact tracing. And we want to make sure that our health department, to do that well, you either need a lot of people or you need Google tracking everyone's phone. And it's unclear how much of the technology piece we're going to have, but for certain we're going to need people. And we also know that there are people in our community that don't have a smartphone that we want to make sure that we're reaching out to and reaching out to effectively. And I see my colleagues nodding, and my sense is that there's going to be support from the governing body, and I think support from the community to make sure that the health department has the resources it needs to do this critical piece of contact tracing that's going to help us open. And does anybody else have any questions or comments about the budget before we open up the public hearing? Okay. So I'd like to open up the public hearing on the budget. And again, thank you for bearing with us with this new technology. In order to submit your comments as part of the public hearing, we're asking that you type them into the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. And if you are not viewing this on your computer, if you're listening by phone, you can submit your comments by email, and you should send an email to princetoncomments@gmail.com, and we have somebody who is monitoring that email account. Okay, so it looks like we have one comment. This is not quite pertinent to the public hearing, but I'll answer it anyway. What is the status of the Alexander Road Bridge? Alexander Road Bridge is in the final stages of construction. And we just heard from our engineer that the final work is expected to happen the week of May 4th. We don't have an exact reopening date yet, but it's expected to be sometime towards the end of that week, or potentially the week after, so by mid-May. That was a question from Thomas Humphreys. We also have a comment on the budget from Joe Butler. What % of the surplus is being spent down this year? And
if you could kind of, as I look through, see if you can help us on this one. One thing I will say, we did do an analysis and have Sandy trying to get the details in terms of the percentages. One of the things we did early on was look at an analysis of our surplus. As you're aware, we have a surplus policy of staying between 15 and 20%. Based on the decisions that we did make in this year's budget, we will stay within our policy this year, even though we are spending additional funds in surplus. I don't have the exact percentage, and hopefully Sandy can come up with that for me real quick.
Yeah, I'm looking. I have a couple documents that I have to open up. So if you can just give me a few seconds.
Hey, Mark, I can answer it.
Okay. Thank you, Scott.
43%.
Again, as Scott says, it was 43%. But as I was saying before, we've looked at the budget. We're still within the parameters of the 15 to 20% of a surplus policy.
Can I just ask a follow-up? So if we're spending down 43%, what would a typical year look like, Scott? I mean, how much of an increase is that?
It's about the same. 40 to 50% is kind of the range we've been in.
And just to explain people who are tuning in from home, it's every year during the course of the year, you spend down the budget. You spend down the surplus is put into the budget, but at the end of the year, there's excess money that then goes back into building the surplus. So you use the prior year's surplus to help smooth things over in the next year's budget. But then some portion of the money comes back.
And one of the things, we have a very healthy surplus, and we've been managing our surplus policy over the years. This is the exact position that you want to be in for situations like we're dealing with now. There are a number of communities that don't have the flexibility that we had to be able to assist and pay some additional surplus and use that surplus without really impinging on our financial stability.
And of course, it's important to keep that surplus because it keeps our municipal credit rating where it is at AAA.
That is correct.
All right.
Ms. Niedergang?
If just to confirm, not in terms of percentages, but in terms of raw dollar amounts, I think that we added $700,000 back into the budget. That's the difference between the budget we had previously decided to move forward with and this one. Mr. DeShields, is that accurate, that number?
It was a combination. It was actually a combination of increases in surplus, decreases in the budget to bring us to the 700.
Right.
Roughly about 600 something was for the tax, the rest based on decreases in salary.
Thank you. Thank you. That's helpful.
Okay, and Ms. Butler had a follow-up question. You expect to have the $6 to $7 million surplus replenished at the end of the year?
That's correct. And actually we do an analysis each year in what our projected surplus is, and we do expect to replenish our surplus at the end of this year. We did that analysis before bringing that before council.
Did you have something to add to that, Scott?
No, sorry, Mark, go ahead.
Okay. Are there any other comments as part of this public hearing? I personally can't see the email, so whoever is monitoring the email, can they just let me know that nothing has come in on the email?
There has not been any email comments, Mayor.
Okay, great. All right, so just want to give one more second for anybody who wanted to comment as part of the public hearing. All right, seeing no one, I'm going to close the public hearing. And then we come to the resolution, which is 20-162, the resolution adopting the 2020 municipal budget. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved, Michelle.
Eve
Okay,
Niedergang
moved.
seconding.
Okay. Why don't we do this one by roll call? So Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Perone Lambrose,
Yes.
Ms. Niedergang,
Yes.
Mr. Cohen,
Yes.
Ms. Fraga,
Yes.
Mr. Williamson,
Yes.
Ms. Sachs.
Yes.
So the budget passes unanimously, vote of 6-0. And I want to thank Mr. DeShield, Ms. Webb, and Mr. Sillers and our Citizens Finance Advisory Committee for all of their work on this, and also for coming back in the last few weeks and putting together a budget that better reflects the situation we're in now. So thank you very much for your work. Okay, now we come to public comments for items that are not already on the agenda. Again, I would like to invite anybody who's tuning in to use the Q&A function for any comments for items that are not already on the agenda. Or if you're listening by phone, you can email a comment to princetoncomments@gmail.com. Is there anybody who would like to make a comment for an item that's not already on the agenda?
No comments from email, Mayor.
Okay. I think it takes a little longer maybe to type in your comment rather than walking up to the microphone. So I'm going to give people another second just so I don't cut anybody off. And seeing no one, I'll close public comment and we'll move on to reports. And I just want to acknowledge the issues with the technology here. So I'm going to run it a little loosely tonight. If somebody missed their opportunity, we'll try to deal with your public comment later. So you can still use that Q&A function. So the first report for tonight is from Mr. DeShield, who's going to be giving an update on where we are with municipal operations, given that the building is closed, and what work is being done to help to think through what this is going to look like as we start to gradually reopen. I think I have two Zoom calls going on, so hopefully you can hear that. All right, Mr. DeShield.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to start to say we continue to deploy different strategies to reduce the spread of the COVID-19 virus, and the municipality, at the same time, municipality continues to provide the essential services to its residents. We recognize that we've got to manage municipal operations in a different way during this pandemic. That being the case, the staff has deployed in a number of different ways to conform with the stay-at-home order and to mitigate the spread of the virus. Staff is working remotely, working a combination of remotely and on-site. They're also using alternative work schedules on-site to reduce the number of people in the building and thereby ensuring that we do the proper social distancing, or doing a combination of all the things that I talked about in a number of departments. What I want to just kind of talk about a little bit about each department, and then we'll go into kind of where we're thinking in terms of moving forward towards reopening. The recreation department continues to provide the maintenance in our parks, which remain open to the public. That includes doing the regular trash, recycling, maintenance of the park. All of those activities continue. In addition to the regular workload, they also are playing a role in supporting the emergency management subcommittee, particularly in the areas of supporting the human services department. Our public works department continues to provide their essential services. Those include cleaning of the municipal services, municipal facilities. That has become even more important as we attempt to mitigate the spread of the virus through proper cleaning procedures. In addition to that, they continue with the regular brush and leaf collection, along with other essential tasks, including proper maintenance of our pump stations. Then we have the planning and zoning office. They continue to provide applications for review for zoning review and other planning activities. We are moving forward with a number of planning activities as we move forward, including affordable housing. The planning board conducted its first meeting last week. The zoning board is scheduled for this week. Those meetings were on administrative activities only. Both boards continue to work on mechanisms and procedures that will ensure that when they have applications before the board, they can meet all of the legal requirements necessary. And we expect at their next meetings for them to start to have some applications at those meetings. In addition to that, engineering department continues to do various projects throughout the capital projects, including managing the Bank Street, Linden Avenue, and Harrison Street traffic signals, and in addition to working on other planning activities associated with affordable housing. Building department, they continue to provide building services, including inspections on those required activities under the executive order. Corner House continues to provide counseling services. They have moved to a completely virtual environment. They also support our human services department with staffing, providing staffing input. And of course, we have the health department who's doing an outstanding job, and I'm really, I have to give them all the kudos. They have really been the heart of this organization during this period of time, and I have to give them all kudos for what they have done, particularly Jeff Grosser, our health officer. In addition to that, I've got to give the same kudos to our human services department, who has really been there to protect all of our needy citizens throughout the community, and really is doing a great job there. The tax collector's office, what I would encourage, they're still in operations. We have people going into the office, and for anyone paying their tax bill, what I would encourage you to is to do it online, if possible. You can always mail it in. In addition, we do have drop boxes that we have put in the lobby of the police department that allow you to drop off your payments there. In addition to that, we've been working on understanding there will be a new working environment. We are encouraging people to use online tools. We currently have roughly 200 fillable automated forms and dozens of printable forms. We're in the process of actively assessing these forms, and we'll be moving those printable forms into an automated process, in addition to looking at electronic forms in such areas as land development process. In addition to that, we continue to provide these essential services and develop plans that will allow us now to begin to look at, what will municipal services look like when we go back to the reopening of our municipal facilities. We started this process last week. There's a committee of municipal employees who have gotten together to develop plans. The charge of that committee is to assist development of policies and programs that will enable us to ensure that we begin our operations and conduct it in a manner that meet a couple of goals that we've set forward for the committee. One is to take care of all of our employees, take care of the health of our employees. Two, to mitigate the future health and welfare issues in our community and among our staffs. And third was to ensure that we're prepared to provide municipal services in a way that meets the new environment that we'll be entering in with social distancing and other measures. The committee will investigate and then make recommendations to me in areas like developing policies and programs that deal with the emotional well-being of our employees, dealing with issues like childcare issues, which will be an issue that we have to deal with, dealing with high-risk employees. In addition to that, we'll be developing long-term infection prevention strategies, like what will be our cleaning controls, how will we use personal protective equipment, and other measures. In addition to that, they will be developing policies for dealing with sick employees, other human resource policies, leave policies, et cetera, that will support in other administrative matters. In addition to that, we'll be developing environmental controls that will facilitate social distancing. Currently, we are seeking quotes to provide glass shields on all of our counters throughout the municipality. That is one thing that we want to put in place early. I will, under my emergency authorities, actually initiate this purchase. We are running into now, everyone is running to do these all at the same time. We want to get in now so that we're ready to reopen when it's time to reopen. So what I will be doing is we're seeking quotes. Before the next meeting, I'll probably enter into the contract using the emergency authority, but I will bring that resolution before council for its approval. In addition, the committee will be looking at other environmental controls that we'll need to put in place in order to ensure that our employees and our residents are safe as they do business within the municipality. The committee will come up with some recommendations. They'll make it to myself. Any of those recommendations that are necessary for council action, I'll bring before council for council action. That's my report, Mayor.
Great, thank you. Can you just talk a little bit about some of the virtual inspections that have been going on?
Sure. One of the innovative things in our inspectors, particularly in the building department, have done are very simple things. Using FaceTime to do inspections. They've actually just called the residents and said, you know what, just put me on FaceTime. I'm going to walk you through, you show me what I need to see, and we can do inspections that way. People are being as creative as possible in how things done. Some of the other things, some of the forms, people have developed some changes in policies, and one I'll bring up is in fire prevention, where we are just requiring affidavits instead of having people for some of the things like smoke detectors. We're able to create a form where they will affirm that these smoke detectors are placed in. We will later go out at another point to make sure that they're in, but we have certification that allow people to close on houses because that is can be an inconvenience for people trying to move during this time. So we're trying to break down all of those barriers as much as we can.
Right, and I also want to just, give a shout out to Access Princeton, and I feel like we were in a stronger position going into this than we would have been had not for the years of work and just starting that process of getting so many of our permit applications and other interactions from the public with the municipality online. So I think it's that work I think was paying off this past month. And I think we realize also we need to do more. Are there any other questions from council, Mr. Cohen?
Yeah, I remember reading a nice email some point this week from Ben Stentz mentioning that their innovative and forward-thinking planning for what to do with the pool this summer was getting national attention, but it didn't really talk about what the plans are. And I was wondering if you have any detail about that. I mean, I know we've gotten a report on, sort of delays in the deadline for early bird rates and refund policies and stuff like that. But I assume there's a lot more to it than just those kinds of financial aspects.
There were some attachments to that email, by the way. The attachments came after.
What I will do is I don't have that information with me, but I can provide it to council after the meeting.
And I don't know if Mr. Williamson wants to add to this, but I would just say that there's obviously a lot of uncertainty right now. And so I think the rec department has been trying to move forward cautiously without closing any doors, but without spending money that doesn't make sense to spend if they're not going to be able to open the pool this summer. So I think they want to be ready in case they're able to. I mean, listening to the governor's press conference earlier today, and I think I think most people looking around, it's highly unlikely that there would be a Memorial Day opening. I don't think that there's been a decision yet to say that the pool will not open at all this summer, nor has there been a decision that it will open. So I think that they're trying to keep their options open and to be ready in case they get a yellow light or a green light, and to think about what that might look like. And it's not just the pool too. It's like they have the summer programs. There's, the rec department. I think they're, Ben would say they're busy all year round, which is true, but I think they're especially busy in the summer, and they provide so many services to the community, and, thinking creatively about what does that look like. And it's not like the need goes away. So, it's definitely going to be a challenge. And, I think you saw through that email, we're really lucky that they're plugged in nationally.
Right.
And I know that it's something a lot of communities around the country are also trying to figure out and think through how to do this safely.
Right. Yeah, there's so many parts to it. I mean, you have everything from figuring out what do you do with early bird fee payers, what type of refunds do you return, et cetera. That's one part. There's also the operational part of, there's certain things you don't want to keep that they open only in the summertime or during the summer season anyway. You don't want to keep certain systems off during the summer, because if you try to reopen it next summer, you find out just from the lack of use that those systems become dysfunctional or malfunctional. So basically, Ben, Evan Moorhead, and the other recreation staff sat down and looked at every facet of everything that they have to deal with, and basically came up with a contingency plan for, as the mayor said, do A, if we do open, or open at a later date, or B, if we don't open at all, and basically made very detailed plans for either eventuality. And that's why Ben Stentz received emails from about 50 different municipalities, including not just those in our country, but also from Canada up north. So it's pretty interesting to know that people around the entire North American continent know that Princeton leads. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, Ms. Niedergang?
I just had a quick follow-up question for Mr. DeShield, because I've been getting inquiries from people who are not sure how to pay their taxes. And I personally pay mine through my mortgage company, so I've never had to learn these things. But going on the website and looking around, I think it's fairly clear that you can pay online, you can pay by a credit card. But currently on the website, it does not say whether you can drop off or send in a check. And I think adding that information would be reassuring for people who, don't know, is if I drop my check off, is someone going to check the mailbox, next May or something like that. And so just to reassure people
We can
that
definitely do
that's an option would be helpful, I think. And thank you for the rest of the information about the other departments and what's been going on. And it sounds like some great work and forward thinking is being done in rec and in many other departments as well. So thank you.
Great. Are there any other questions for Mr. DeShield or comments on this? Okay. All right, thank you. Now we'll move on to council reports, and we'll start with Mr. Cohen.
Thank you. I have three quick reports. Wanted to mention that last Wednesday we had a good informational session for the green renewable energy aggregation program that we've been working on for the last several months, and finally got a successful bid on, and are moving forward with this. It's an opt-out program, so all residents of Princeton will be signed up for the program unless they choose not to. Check your bills, actually, because I thought I would get signed up automatically, but then discovered that, in fact, I was getting power from a third party, so I had to actively sign up for it. We've been getting a little bit of pushback from some individuals in the community who have concern about the energy profile, I guess I would say, of the firm that's providing our energy. And I don't want to get into it. It's kind of technical for tonight, but there will be some letters to the editor that you can find in the town topics this week, both from the residents who are concerned and the subcommittee's response. The subcommittee who did the planning for the program. And then I'm sure we'll have information up on the website as well that covers the same material. Second report I wanted to mention is the Bicycle Advisory Committee had their first virtual meeting last Thursday. It was a good meeting. Mostly we were talking about sort of rebalancing streets for people. This is a topic, it's a hot topic nationwide, actually. in the era of coronavirus when traffic is so much lighter and or automobile traffic is so much lighter, but at the same time, foot traffic and bicycle traffic is increased, and people need more space to keep social distancing when they're out walking or riding their bicycles. So there are a bunch of strategies for trying to create more road space, basically for walkers and bike riders, and just stay tuned for that. We're actually moving forward with installing a bunch of the bike boulevards that were identified in the bicycle master plan a couple of years ago. And there'll be some other aspects of trying to do that rebalancing that you'll be hearing about as we move forward. And then the last report I wanted to give is, as the liaison to the planning board, I would just mention that our longtime planning administrator, Eileen Catronio, basically is retiring at the end of this week, but I think she had some reserved sick time. So she actually, her last day was this past Friday. She has been an absolute trove of wisdom for the planning department over the 30 or so years that she's been here. And she gave me a really wonderful parting gift. I've been pushing to move to a more online land use application process. And she helped to get set up a virtual plan room for the department. We're just starting to get it loaded up with applications, but for people who used to have to come into the building to view plans, members of the public who are interested in learning about applications that were going to be coming to the planning board, you will be now able to do that going to the municipal website and viewing those documents in electronic form. So it's a terrific parting gift from Eileen, and I thank her for that.
Excellent, thank you. Ms. Fraga?
Yes, Human Services wanted me to clarify some of regarding the Coronavirus Emergency Relief Fund, what type of assistance they can provide and what they can't provide. I know at our last meeting, it came up whether, I think it was from someone from the public asked whether there was assistance available to help with mortgage payments, for example, right, from David. And they wanted me to clarify that unfortunately they can't help with mortgage payments, but they've also been receiving many calls from Princeton business owners who are asking for assistance with their commercial rents, which are $5,000 and more a month. And they say, unfortunately, they don't have the capacity to help with that either. So they just wanted me to clarify that. I also wanted to report that on an almost daily basis, I'm getting someone from the community contacting me that needs assistance, whether it's with face coverings or they have someone on their family, someone in the household who's ill, and they need assistance with helping them with the requirement to isolate or self-quarantine. And so thank you, Jeff, for helping with that. We also have members of the community who are helping with that. But also almost on a daily basis too, I want to say that I get calls from members of the community who want to know how to help. So it's a good balance. And I think it's really bringing out the best in our community of how we can come together to help each other. That's it.
Great, thank you. Ms. Niedergang?
Yes, thank you. So just a few things from the Princeton Environmental Commission, which had its first virtual meeting this past Wednesday. The Environmental Commission has written a letter to council, which we'll be discussing or will be presented to council at our next meeting. but I just wanted to stress one of the points they made, or the major point that they're making in this letter, is that certain work in protecting our environment and dealing with climate change should go forward despite the current pandemic. And the relationship between the pandemic and our environment is really clear. And by improving our environment, we improve our ability to be more resistant to things like coronavirus and other types of plagues that may be affecting us going forward. And I just want to issue say one quote from that letter. The COVID-19 epidemic is a reminder that human health is inseparable from the health of our environment. The choices that our town makes about land use, the built environment, transportation, and the protection of open space will have direct impacts on our local air quality, water quality, flooding, and need for stormwater mitigation measures. These choices will also affect the health of residents. And there's more details in the letter, but I won't go into that. PEC also passed a resolution about the Northeast Supply Enhancement Compressor Station that is planned to be built in Franklin. This is also known as the Nessie compressor. And this resolution also will come before council on May 11th. The PCs, as you might expect, quite opposed to this unnecessary new piece of infrastructure for hydrocarbons. And finally, I just want to mention that back in January, I believe council passed a chicken ordinance, or maybe it was a little bit later than that. Health Officer Grosser might be able to remind me of the exact date. And one of the parts of that ordinance allowed for people with larger chicken flocks to be grandfathered in, only because of coronavirus and other things. Some of the implementation of that ordinance has not been done, and that was pointed out to us, and we're now working on getting that done. So it might be that we'll have to talk to our attorney about this, but I think we'll be extending the grandfathering period so that people are really notified about this before all of a sudden they're not in compliance with the law. So those were the three things that I wanted to mention. And I did have a quick question for David about something he mentioned, I believe, last time we met, which I think we had talked about using reverse 911 to get to people who might need help, but who might not be on social media. And I'm wondering, I didn't hear anything else about that. So I know this is a little out of order, but I'm wondering if maybe you can update us a little on that, if there's anything to update.
There's really not. I actually noticed that when I was reviewing the minutes, that I was supposed to follow up on that with the communications subcommittee, but I failed to do that. So that is a conversation to have. I will mention that there is another idea that has come up since our last meeting for doing outreach to residents by phone, which came from Ross Wishnick, who's the head of the Human Services Commission, I guess, which was to work with local realtors who have an interest in getting acquainted with the people who live in their neighborhoods. And he's done some initial outreach to them, and they have actually some interest in doing these kinds of outreach calls. And obviously a real human voice is better than a robocall, because they'll be able to give us feedback on the interest level of people that they reach and so forth. So that's a parallel track, I guess, that I would say I'm following. And I actually see that as being maybe even a little bit preferable as a way to do legacy outreach.
Thank you for that, David.
Thanks for that report. Mr. Williamson?
I was going to say, as soon as I get myself off mute, if I said it before, you wouldn't have heard me. Yeah, just a couple of things. Regarding our corner house, just want to mention that, of course, because of the pandemic, our corner house had to postpone some of his main fundraisers, but they are accepting donations. And if one chooses to give, they can go to the corner house website, which is cornerhousenj.org. Again, that's cornerhousenj, one word, .org. And another thing for applicants for the next year's leadership programs, the applications are still being taken online, and the deadline as it stands today is the end of April 2020. I'm not sure if that's going to be extended. So for high school students who's interested in the leadership programs, they need to apply by the end of April of 2020. And I believe that's all the news that's fit to print. Thanks, Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Williamson. Ms. Perron-Lambros.
Yeah. I did have one thing. I don't really know where it fits in, but I did want to mention, I mentioned a lot before about our outreach with the business community and how concerned we are what's going to happen to these businesses on the other end when we come out of this. And just another area I really want to bring up are our nonprofit organizations in town. Particularly concerned with the Arts Council right now, with the cancellation of so many events, so many fundraisers. There's only so much you can do virtually. Particular to the Arts Council, they've done the So Many Masks, which has been a wonderful service for the community. And I don't have the answers. I don't think anybody does, but I think I just want to bring that to the attention of my colleagues on council as well, and see if we can't find ways to help these organizations so that they're all, going to be there when we come out. So, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Michelle. Ms. Sachs.
No reports tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. I have, this is more of a report, I guess, to my colleagues on council and to the boards, committees, and commissions. But at our next council meeting, we're going to be taking a second look at our goals and priorities, seeing where we are. It's almost halfway through the year now. It's hard to believe. And to take a second look, just in light of the fact that the world has changed pretty dramatically. So it's an opportunity to say, where might we want to refocus, and where do we want to, make the tough decisions to say this might be something that needs to wait to 2021. So I would just encourage everybody to take another look at the list that we approved, and to start thinking about how you feel about those items. And if there's other things that have come up, a few things have come up tonight, like obviously when we were putting that list together, we weren't thinking of building an army of contact tracers. I don't think that was on anyone's list. Or, rethinking our streets to make our sidewalks wide enough for social distancing. So, both of which might be new priorities. So it should be a important and interesting discussion for our next meeting. And with that, I want to turn it over to staff reports. And we do have Mr. Grosser here with us tonight. Just turn it over to you, Jeff, if you have anything that you'd like to start off with reporting to council, and if we want to open it up, if council members have additional questions for you. Your mic's not working for some reason. It might be working now.
Does that work?
Yeah.
I try to be safe and use the headset because you just never know what you're going to hear from the four little ones. So I'll do my best to get through it without that. All right. So good evening, everybody. I just wanted to provide an update this evening And we're fortunate to have Dr. DiFerdinando on as well. I'll give a operational update from the health department's perspective, and we'll turn it over to Dr. DiFerdinando for a more regional look at what's happening, here in Mercer County, throughout the state, and then also through the country. So to start off, we're continuing to see daily case increases in Mercer County and in Princeton. What's good news is that the percentage of daily increases is starting to level off at a low level that we've seen since Governor Murphy's stay-at-home order back in mid-March. The bad news is that we're still grappling with testing deficiencies and trying to get both symptomatic and also asymptomatic individuals tested to get an idea of disease progression throughout our region. What we've been doing at the Princeton Health Department primarily, and I'll get to long-term care facilities in a few minutes, but we've been working with them because they've obviously been at the forefront of this pandemic with regards to some of the more severe cases. So that's an item that we're trying to work with them on to make sure that they have the adequate testing that they have. I'll get to that in a few. But back to the case count, we began to pull racial and ethnic demographics with regards to some of our case counts in Princeton. Although we're only looking at a case count of 110, we are starting to see some upward trends of our non-Hispanic Asian population and Hispanic populations having higher case counts than what the demographics would suggest. So as we saw last week, we had a quarantine situation where we had a Hispanic family, and some of the issues that we were running into, and this is why contact tracing is very important from a very versatile perspective from a health department, is you have to have individuals that are contact tracers that have the ability to speak Spanish. We're very fortunate in Princeton that we work extremely closely with Human Services. We have a councilwoman who is a liaison to both departments, so she kind of works through both of those operational pieces as well. But we find that some of the contact tracing that we've had with these 110 cases, you'll get into situations where you might find out about the case prior to a laboratory test or a doctor calling the health department. And in those cases, we're very fortunate to have good communication with Human Services, where they might hear word of mouth through families that they're close with or serve that say, hey, we found out that we have a family, they're concerned over a potential positive result. Can we call them with you and find out more information? And that's exactly what happened last week. And as a result, we were able to work with Human Services and safely quarantine a family of individuals that needed a place to quarantine safely because they weren't able to do so in their current living situation. And back to Governor Murphy's roadmap to getting through this pandemic in New Jersey, one of the priority points is safe quarantines and isolation. And that's something that we've been working on in Princeton since this pandemic started, because obviously we've quarantined and isolated individuals in the past, but we knew that because coronavirus was most likely going to be very widespread, we needed the ability to quarantine quick. We were able to quarantine these individuals, and we're also in an MOU agreement with the Princeton Theological Seminary, who's going to provide some living quarters to individuals that need situations like this last minute. And aside from Human Services helping with the food deliveries to these individuals, Sustainable Princeton's also been doing a fantastic job by assisting the health department actually place the individuals over at the seminary. So it just takes one extra to do items off of our health department list. The other item that everyone's aware of, well aware of, are the long-term care centers. So the Princeton Health Department's been working very closely with both Princeton Care Center and Acorn Glen Assisted Living Center since this pandemic has broke. And unfortunately, before we knew of spread that could be transmitted through asymptomatic individuals, before universal masking, disease transmission was amongst our region. And that was one of the items why individuals were questioning whether or not the lockdown was enough with some of these long-term care facilities. Non-essential visitation ended in early to mid-March. However, the ability to get a comprehensive look at who was working at these facilities and who was in them in the first place, and testing all of them was not yet to be defined. And what I mean by that is, to test an entire facility is not only right now difficult. If you do it, it's just a snapshot in time. So when that staff goes home, if they're in touch with their family or household member that might have coronavirus, they can go back to work. And if they haven't been tested, they could pick it up in that meantime and work. So what we've been pushing the Princeton Care Center and Acorn Glen to do, and we had a very extensive discussions about this with our Office of Emergency Management group, is increased testing. And by increased testing, we mean testing the populations that we're most concerned about. So for staff, it's the staff you want to test. You want to test the staff that are caring for the well, because you don't want them to transmit anything to the well. For the residents and the patients, you want to test the patients that are symptomatic. You want to see if their symptoms are actually coronavirus. And then you want to test any potentially exposed residents that might be in contact, if for some reason they might have been in contact with somebody else in that living center. We've been very fortunate to have fantastic communication with both of these centers. We have daily or weekly check-ins with the medical directors, the chief medical directors, and the executive directors of these centers. And we have daily case updates from their directors of nursing. So we're very fortunate there to have daily communication with them and keeping up to date. And as we progress through this pandemic, long-term care centers are going to need continued support. And the municipality has actually reached out to the Office of Emergency Management at the county level to see if we could request additional medical volunteers to work at these centers, not because they don't have enough staff right now, but because they could expect to not have enough staff moving forward, depending on how long the pandemic continues. Lastly, I just want to note that, from a contact tracing perspective, I know this has been a hot item in the news. It's very interesting when you hear people talk about contact tracing, because from my perspective, contact tracing is our number one tool with regards to how we do all our disease investigations. We've been doing it, for as long as I've been involved with public health, and I'm sure Dr. Fernando will get into it. It's been as long as he's been doing public health, which is a little longer than me. But it's our main tool. And in Princeton, we're very fortunate that we have, staff that are devoted to get to the bottom of where these infections came from and try to limit the spread. A couple of questions have been posed to us with regards to, the governor's lockdown went into effect back in mid-March, the stay-at-home order. Why are we still seeing cases? Are they coming from the community? Are they coming from the grocery store? Are they coming from work? And the answer to all of these is yes. There's community spread. Are we seeing this in one particular area in terms of new infections? Not necessarily. Our long-term care centers right now in Princeton are making up about 15% of our total caseload right now. All the additional cases are occupationally related. They're related to household contacts that didn't know they had it. They were asymptomatic prior and then spread it. And unfortunately, we have individuals in the past that, a family member might have visited from out of town. And that's how we've traced some spread back. So we have to continue to urge people. And I know people continue to say, socially distance, wear a mask, and we can't start, glazing over when we hear this. We have to continue to do this. The numbers are there, with percentages of daily cases going down. The next step is you see incidents go down, and we start seeing fewer and fewer new confirmed cases, and you start to see more negative tests come through. And once you start seeing that, you'll start to see a quicker turnaround. But we have to stay on top of our fellow Princetonians with regards to this is working. It's not a fast process. So we have to continue to hit that message. I know I've gone on and on for a little bit. I'll make sure I leave time at the end for questions, but I want to turn it over to George because I know he's got some valuable information for us.
Thank you, Jeff. And can everybody hear me? I'm wearing these headphones for the same reason that Jeff might. I can sort of hear myself, which that's kind of a positive too. issue I would bring up is try to give you some perspective from, I've been doing disease intervention, which is the fancy term for contact tracing for close to 40 years, and maybe give you some big concepts, and then you'll see, I think, how they're going to affect the next several months. One is that typically when we do disease intervention for any infectious disease, we have a tangible object to offer the person we're doing an intervention with. So if you do testing for syphilis, which is one of the classics, you both offer the person, frankly, the opportunity to do some of the difficult informational work with one of their contacts, and you also are offering them treatment for an infection. So you have two things, and so there's a type of transaction that's going on there where you, as the public health worker, are asking them for information and cooperation, and you actually have something tangible to offer them in return. The same thing is true with most of the infections that we deal with. We have something tangible to offer that person. Right now, we're going to have a challenge unless and until we get either a antiviral, which is what we offer at this point for people who are HIV positive. We offer them the ability and the knowledge to get into treatment for that viral disease, or a vaccine, which in certain circumstances is something you can offer people, both in the contact tracing circumstance and in other circumstances. Frankly, we don't have those things to offer. So the kind of things that Councilperson Fraga brought up, that Jeffrey brought up, these things, they're not, and I don't want to say they're peripheral, but but I'll put more of an emphasis on them, saying they're going to be central to our contact tracing, because those are the things we're going to be offering people. Okay, I'm giving you this information. You're positive for this infection. What I can offer you is helping you deal with that in your life, in your family circumstance, in your work circumstance. And that's complicated. It's, the example for syphilis, you give them a shot of penicillin. That makes it a quote unquote easy disease intervention. Here, and you can read things at various places where people are calling up patients to let them know that they're positive, and they find out that there are hour-long conversations on the phone, because really you're talking about their social life, their economic life, their family life. And so this is going to be all of these infections are unique. This one will be unique in its own way. And so that might be the first idea. We don't have this tangible object to offer, so we're going to have to think really hard of what that means in Princeton, what exactly we're offering, when Jeff and his staff, and then to the extent that the state can put these boots on the ground, how either county or regional staff, what they can offer. Because if you think about it, and one of the points that was in the governor's handout today was that it was a line that there was a lot of detail in the handout, but you still kind of have to read between the lines on a lot of this. And one said that there would be a county and regional focus on contact tracing. And if you think about, and I'm okay with that. Jeff knows this. Liz has, Mayor Lempert has heard this, because the disease doesn't know any boundary, but the interventions sometimes have a municipal boundary to them. So that's going to be an interesting circle to square, where the disease can cross borders, but our interventions are going to be very particularized to our individuals. I could spend a lot of time, but I don't think I will. There's a lot of complications with testing. Maybe I'll make a few points. It isn't, so this first point is, it is not meant to sound flippant to say, be careful what you wish for when you get a lot of testing, because there is a substantial difference in this world between what is called diagnostic testing. That is, the patient shows up at the emergency room or their doctor's office. They have a fever, they're short of breath, they have other symptoms, just they were added to today by the Centers for Disease Control. That is a diagnostic situation. In a screening situation, where disease intervention often leads you to, someone is diseased, they point to someone else, you're no longer in a literally diagnostic circumstance. And the reason we make that distinction between diagnostic testing and screening testing is that there's something called the positive predictive value. And that means just how sure of the test result can you be when you're screening, as opposed to when you're doing diagnostic testing. Diagnostic testing, in a bizarre way or somewhat counterintuitive way, is easier to do. The patient's right in front of you, they're sick, you know the disease is running through the community. Even if the tests are negative, many clinicians go, I'm not going to worry about that test. If it looks like a coronavirus case, if it sounds like a coronavirus case, I've got 13 things telling me that. This one thing is telling me no. I'm not going to let that cloud my judgment. But Jeff's staff is going to be in a situation where a lot of the contacts are going to be feeling perfectly fine. And the only thing they will have is basically a finger pointing to that person. And that throws all the statistics off. So given that the only intervention is the social intervention, and the social intervention is often isolation, we really want to be sure that the person is truly infected, but the tests may not give us a final answer. So we're wading, W-A-D-I-N-G, into a very challenging set of circumstances when we get all these extra tests. And everybody will do as good a job as they can. We will be honest with people and tell them that we can't be exactly sure of everything we're talking about. To some people, that lack of absolute knowledge will be very challenging for them to accept. Because you'll be saying, I want to make a point of it, I'm not exactly sure of your test result, but I want you to isolate for 14 days. I can't speak for anybody else on this call. That would be a challenging answer that would be a challenging sentence for me to hear. If you then think about the fact that it's one thing for a retired person to hear that, and it's another thing for the person who is the only breadwinner in their family that makes minimum wage to hear, I'm not sure about your test result, but I want you to isolate for 14 days. There is a lot of social support that group of humans will wind up needing. And so this won't be a typical contact tracing year. If we get antivirals, if we get a vaccine, we'll go back to the old way. We'll have something to offer. We'll have a tangible object in our hand. But between now and then, it's going to take all our brains and all our emotional ability to work through this. And so, I could go on a lot of other things, but I have a strong feeling that that's my biggest message to the council tonight, is that.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, George. That was important to think about. Yeah, Ms. Fraga, start us off.
Mute. Mute.
Okay. Thank you very much. And I just want to bring up again, it's something that I know with the Board of Health we had discussed early on, that we already anticipated that it was going to be an issue that we needed to address, and that's members of our community who are several individuals that are living in close quarters and if someone becomes ill, it's nearly impossible for them to isolate or self-quarantine. And so I know that, just recently, Jeff, we worked together to help a family that it was an urgent situation where we needed to find housing for members of the household that a family member had been released from the hospital, and I learned it's still contagious, right? That was, and I learned of another household today, Jeff. I don't know if you're aware yet. There's another household where, in this situation, I believe every member of the family is ill. So, in that case, they can self-quarantine in the household there. But I'm just concerned that if this continues to grow, do we have the capacity to help every individual who may need assistance in self-quarantining and providing, I know as a community, we can provide the meals, we can provide other assistance that the members of the household may need, but do we have the capacity to be able to find a place for everyone that may need it? Secondly, another thing that's I'm just finding is just the way it's developing. I'm concerned that there's many members of our community who, either because of lack of trust, we're not finding out until they're really scared that there's an issue, that it's because they reached out to a trusted member of the community to let them know that they're ill, they need help, but they didn't reach out to the appropriate, whether it's the health department or human services. We're coordinating those efforts, but there may be individuals out there or families in the household that need assistance, and they're not coming to our attention right away. So those are two issues that I think we need to discuss and figure out how we're going to address that. And actually, I also had a question. So maybe you can address them all at the same time. I know early on through the school district and also the health department, we're able to donate some masks that were distributed to members of our vulnerable population. But that was several weeks ago, and they're still wearing, which I think they're considered disposable masks. And I don't know if those are still, it's still safe for them to wear those. I've been, the ones that I hear of that are in need, either ones that, if there's small numbers, I can provide, but if they're larger numbers, I am putting them in touch with the Arts Council that is providing on a larger scale. And because, like I said, again, with the issue of trust, many members of the community who are not reaching out to the Arts Council when they need a face covering. So I'm working with members of the community who can perhaps be the liaison to assist members of the community who need face coverings, and they may not be reaching out directly to the Arts Council. So I'm helping them coordinate that effort to get everyone who needs a face covering, who are at risk of being exposed because someone in the community or somebody even in the household is positive. That's tested positive. So, I don't know if you have, as far as the face mask, and if there's any other thoughts you have on how we can address the other issues.
Yeah, I'll start with the face masks. In general, we have additional face masks at the town. So if we need to distribute more of those, somebody just needs to let us know. Outside of that, if they have cloth face coverings, they can wash those, and we have instructions on how to do so on the Princeton COVID site. Mm-hmm. I know police has been very proactive about when they see individuals that are not wearing them, trying to distribute. But if we can do that on a wider scale, just please let me know. We'll try to get those masks out. Your first point's a really important one, Councilwoman. I feel like, the seminary is a great opportunity for individuals to quarantine. to get out of those situations where they may not be able to quarantine safely in their home. If this is wider spread, are we going to need additional facilities? The answer is yeah. There's an opportunity for that, and those discussions should begin or should continue with facilities that have dormitories or other living quarters. In my mind, if these places are not open right now because they're not in session, it could be a discussion, and then when the moment comes, you flip the switch and we get to the point where we're at capacity at the seminary and we move people over there. Back to Dr. DiFernando, what he mentioned, there's a lot of uncertainties. So having the potential to need to quarantine a lot of people like that, it can't hurt to have the capacity. I can put it that way. It's just a discussion. So I'm with you 100%. That's a great point.
Can we clarify too, because I didn't understand until the day that we needed to assist the family that for the seminary, it's not for individuals who are positive, who have tested positive. Is
We're
that correct?
quarantining individuals over there. We're going to do our best to isolate individuals in their own personal home. Correct.
Mr. Williamson?
Just a couple quick questions. The first one is I've been reading media reports that the Princeton Hospital at Plainsboro, which is the closest major hospital to our town, has reached patient capacity, even though there's something about they're still accepting new patients. Just trying to figure out what does that mean for folks in Princeton who may get ill, COVID-19 or otherwise.
Maybe I'll start with that. And I know Jeff, I know monitors actively what is called the divert status. That's a inside baseball phrase for whether any of the hospitals that patients go to from Princeton, either the Princeton Medical Center, Capitol Health, or RWJ Hamilton, which are the three big ones that people in Princeton go to, whether they are taking certain types of emergency room patients. So there have been occasions when one or more of those hospitals put up a sign on this computer saying we're close to our maximum, but I don't know of any circumstance, and so where they have not been able to accept a patient up until now. Is that your understanding, Jeff?
That's correct. They've been on divert before, but it's more of a it's
a
really,
yellow. It's a yellow light rather than a red light.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so it sounds like Councilman Williamson. I don't know about you. When you say you're on divert, that doesn't sound like a yellow light to me.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds like a full stop. Mm-hmm. But myself and a couple of members of the Princeton University medical team had a conference call last Monday with the emergency operations director over at Princeton Medical Center, and we discussed this topic in detail. And he explained to us because we literally raised the exact same issue with him that you raised tonight, and he said, no, we can put that warning light up. First of all, it doesn't stop an emergency transport person from bringing a patient to us anyway. So it's not and we don't put it up as a full red light either. So it doesn't have to be, it doesn't stop anybody from going there. And so they are still accepting patients.
Okay, and just a quick second one. Me not being a medical professional, just from media reports, it says that there's no proof to show that someone cannot be reinfected with COVID-19. So when we have folks who are quarantining together, if one of these people get infected, or let's say you have two people who test positive for COVID-19, does it make sense to keep them together? Or since it is possible, based on what I've been hearing, that a person could actually be reinfected?
You know, it's a challenge. It's a challenging issue because I think from a practical, I can tell you what's happening all over the world from a practical point of view. So literally in every country, people who have what you would call a point in time exposure. So I'm living with two other people. I get sick today. They had their exposure at the same time. My wife and my daughter had their exposure at the same time. While theoretically, my wife could get sick 2 days from now, get better, and my daughter could get sick 2 weeks from now and reinfect my wife. From a practical point of view, that's considered to be such a low probability that there's no point in separating the family. I think what people are describing in your the circumstance you're reading, and what those of us who interact with the healthcare community think about is, okay, you have a healthcare worker that gets sick, goes home, gets better. They have some temporary immunity, but the immunity weakens over a period of weeks or months, and then they get reinfected again by an exposure.
Okay.
That's one. And then unfortunately, there's a second thing where you don't necessarily get fully better, but you feel like you're getting better, feel like you're getting better. Your viral amount goes down, and then you have a basically relapse or something like that. I'm sorry to, I know this can get really into the weeds, but I think
No, that's good.
the first answer
Better
was the big
understanding.
one. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
Are there any other questions for Jeff or George? No. Oh, yeah, Ms. Niedergang.
I'm sorry, I don't really have a question, but I just want to extend again a thank you to both of you and to the entire staff, the health department, human services. I don't think it can be said enough how in your debt we are. I know how hard you're working and how deeply you take this assault on our community, and just a heartfelt thank you from
Well, let me
all
give
of
a
us
big
for-
let me give a big amen to the human services part of that. Not to diminish what the health department is doing and the contribution we're trying to offer at the Board of Health, but if you think about the stuff we've talked about tonight and the type of interventions we have, we public health types are essentially calling human services public health interventions. So the human services one, let me say a big amen to that without diminishing what the health department is doing.
Yeah, I want to echo that too, Dr. DeFernando. Human services is where, after we go through the contact tracing, when we determine there's a problem, that's who we turn to get the problem solved a lot of the times. So it's, if they weren't there right next to us, fortunately, there's a hallway between us. It's a great relationship. So we appreciate that. And thank you guys for your support.
Can I say human services? When we speak of human services, we're talking about Melissa Urias. She's doing a great job.
Absolutely.
Yes, she is. Thank you.
I like the way Jeff put it. Jeff finds the problem. Human services is solving them.
It's just as hard to find the problem though, just so.
It's a great, we're in all seriousness, we're very, very lucky to have a great team. So thank you. Thank you both for your work and for that report.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other staff reports before we move on? Ms. Stockton, did you have anything?
No reports, thank you.
Okay, great, thanks. All right, so we'll move on then to resolutions. First resolution is 2163, resolution authorizing a professional services agreement in the not to exceed amount of $19,300 with T&M Associates for annual gas monitoring and inspection reporting and for repairs to a water monitoring well for the Princeton landfill. Is there a motion to approve this resolution?
Leticia Fraga moves.
And is there a second?
Eve Niedergang seconds.
Okay, and any discussion? Mr. Cohen, were you trying to second or were you just trying, were you trying to ask a question?
I was trying to second.
Okay, All right, and then just by way of explanation, this is for some relatively routine maintenance out on the old landfill. So all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, resolution passes unanimously. Next is 2164, resolution authorizing a professional services agreement with Remington and Vernick engineers in a not to exceed amount of $22,875 for mapping of stormwater outfalls for New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection Municipal Stormwater Permit, MS4 Compliance and Geographic Information System Maintenance Services. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Mr.
Second.
Cohen, seconded by Ms. Niedergang. Any discussion on this resolution? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, resolution passes unanimously. Next is 2165, resolution authorizing a professional services agreement in the not to exceed amount of $64,200 with Suburban Consulting Engineers Incorporated for the design of a synthetic turf field and field lighting at Hilltop Park. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Williamson. Is there a second?
Second, Ms. Niedergang.
Seconded by Ms. Niedergang. And is there any discussion on this?
I just wanted to mention that this is part of the $500,000 matching grant that we received from the Mercer at Play program.
Okay, great, thank you. And I know Ms. Stockton's been working on this. Did you want to add anything before we take a vote?
No, thank you.
Okay, all right. And if there's no questions or comment from council, then all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, resolution passes unanimously. And next we come to the consent agenda, which contains items of a routine nature that are passed by a single vote. And Ms. Niedergang.
Yes, I need to recuse. I would like to take out for the consent agenda, the resolution at the end. I did not write down the number. Wait.
Okay.
Resolution 2167.
Okay.
And I'm an employee of the watershed, so I'll need to recuse myself for that. So when we get to that, I'll vote on the rest of the consent agenda.
Why don't we do that one? Why don't we do that one first, then you can come back,
Okay.
because otherwise you might miss the adjournment of the meeting.
That
So
would
that's
be-
a
okay.
very long consent agenda list, longest I've ever seen. Just kidding.
I'm
Right.
going to both mute and turn off my video so you can do whatever you want without me
Only two
being
items on
present.
there.
All right.
Okay, all right. So we have resolution 2167, which is resolution authorizing the waiver of property taxes for block 2001, lot 22 in the municipality of Princeton for the remainder of 2020. And this is for that open space property. So is there a motion to approve?
Moved by Michelle Peron-Lambros.
And is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Sachs. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, resolution passes unanimously. And then we can invite Eve back. There you are. That actually works much better. All right. And is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? Which
That'd
is
be
just
so
now
moved.
item 1.
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Niedergang. Is there a second?
Second, Michelle Peron-Lambros.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the consent agenda passes unanimously. And now is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Second.
So it's been moved by Mr. Cohen, seconded by Ms. Niedergang. All in favor of adjournment?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a good
Thank you.
night. Night,
Good
everyone.
night.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you all.
Good night.
Good night.